to another live stream, and thank you so much for tuning in for another show. In Israel, reports are saying that the war criminal prime minister of the country is in his house because he had food poisoning. According to multiple reports, they said that Benjamin Netanyahu was checked in his home, but at the same time, he's getting an IV, which is a drip, something that's usually reserved to hospitals. On the other hand, the doctors that were reportedly seeing him said that he can continue to manage his cabinet affairs from home, despite the fact that having a food poisoning is something very significant that you don't really want to do anything with. If you have food poisoning, you want to lie down in bed. And if it reaches a level where you need an IV drip to get rehydrated, that means you can't sip anything in. You're in a really, really bad state. So what's this all about exactly? And is he faking it? Why? Because there was a cabinet meeting today in Israel, and there were other reports about the withdrawal of 2 brigades from Gaza by the IDF. One of them was the paratroopers brigade from Khan Yunis, and another brigade from Division 98. Afterwards, we had more confirmations that the IDF is saying that we're getting closer to a deal. More positive signs. Israel is saying that a deal is going to happen this week. We're getting close to closing everything. Adam Boehler is back in the picture, confirming that Benjamin Netanyahu made the necessary concessions that were required by the Palestinian resistance, which is realigning the Israeli forces in what they call the Morag axis in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, something that the Palestinian resistance completely rejected outright. And in Israel, they're saying that they are assuming that Hamas will accept this offer. If Israel is saying that, that means Israel provided the necessary concessions to the Palestinian side in order to get a deal. From a Palestinian perspective, there's still no confirmation yet. What we're seeing is starvation inside of the Gaza Strip, people collapsing from starvation. However, Israel is withdrawing troops from inside of the Gaza Strip, despite the fact that this is not being heavily underreported, by the way. So let's begin with all of the reports and try to talk about Benjamin Netanyahu's sickness and the fact that he had food poisoning. This was the first one of them. Prime Minister suffers from intestinal inflammation due to eating spoiled food. According to this report, the Prime Minister's office announced that after feeling unwell during the night, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was examined at home by Professor Alon Hershko, director of the Internal Medicine Department at Hadassah in Kerem. And it was found intestinal inflammation following eating spoiled food. The statement also stated that after further tests, the Prime Minister's condition was determined to be good, and he is currently receiving medical treatment with IV fluids following dehydration that accompanied the illness. In accordance with his doctor's instructions, the Prime Minister will rest at home for the next 3 days and conduct his state affairs from there. This after Netanyahu was absent from the cabinet meeting today. We'll get to the final point because it's very crucial in what's happening. Number one, very suspicious. Again, if you have food poisoning, you're unable to get a hydration orally, and you have to get an IV drip to get rehydrated. That means you're feeling awful. I mean, if any of you were sick or had any food poisoning at one point, you can imagine the state that you're in. You don't want to see anyone. You're lying in bed. Any movement will give you vertigo. You'll be dizzy. You want to fall down. Everything wants to make you vomit. Okay, how is he going to be able to conduct his job? And how comes he's at home? Unless he has a hospital in his house, by the way, and he's in that much of a bad state because of his cancer and other health problems. But he was absent from the cabinet meeting. That's the trick here, because he previously did the same tricks with the Israeli courts, so he can avoid court hearings. There were other reports speaking about this illness and the fact that he was missing the cases that we need to talk about and discuss. So the Israeli website Times of Israel had food poisoning, and his office said that he skipped the cabinet meeting, and he indeed skipped the cabinet meeting. What were they supposed to speak about in this cabinet meeting, and why now? Well, cabinet meetings now are extremely sensitive. Why? The Israeli Knesset is going on a break in just a week or so, a week or two. every single meeting, something can go wrong. In every single cabinet meeting, there are arguments and feuds and fights. Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't want to be in a meeting where things will be really heated and tense, and someone would flip his lid and go all out and, topple his government immediately. Let alone the fact that he is in a minority government now, with all of the religious elements or religious orthodox elements in his government resigning, some of them not resigning from the coalition, though, to keep the coalition still there, from Shas in particular, because they don't want to go with what is called the Israeli left, to collapse what's called the Israeli right-wing government. But that shows you that things are fragile. He doesn't want further problems now because things are getting cooked. I've been speaking to you in the previous weeks about the potential of this deal being completed towards the end of July and the beginning of August. Of course, at the end of the day, it could collapse completely. Everything could go wrong. But based on the interests of Netanyahu, because he has himself as the main interest, he would want the Israeli Knesset to go on a break when he decides to go on the ceasefire agreement. He wouldn't want any problems, because during the break, no one can challenge him, no one can threaten to leave the coalition or the government or whatever. And when the Israeli Knesset is back, there are going to be Jewish holidays in Israel, and he's going to have excuses to extend it. He might try and buy some more time to convince his coalition members not to have any more problems, and then package everything in a really nice way to sell the Israeli public in preparation for the next elections that he wants to be in the early part of next year rather than October 2026, too sensitive. October, and he will get, more criticism in that time. Why is he skipping as well? And what are the other members of the cabinet saying exactly? And what is he trying to avoid? Well, the man who would be present in his cabinet, well, one of the people, at least, who would be present in the cabinet of the man who has a lot of influence on Benjamin Netanyahu and was a big part of the decision making in the genocide and the continuation and expansion of the Israeli genocide. Smotrich made a statement today, and he was supposed to be in that same cabinet meeting that Benjamin Netanyahu did not attend because of his supposed poisoning. He said the following: history will not forgive anyone who overthrows the government and leads to surrender in Gaza. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich spoke in the Sha'alim Network's nuclear conference in Jerusalem and addressed the Haredi withdrawal from the coalition. History will not forgive anyone who brings down the government, takes us to elections, he said. He added that his words were addressed to everyone, to the Haredi and everyone hand in hand to Edelstein and others. Woe and woe to anyone who breaks up the national camp and brings us to surrender in front of Gaza. What do we understand? He's one of the most honest people in Netanyahu's government, and he's talking about surrender to Gaza. That's not coming from the mouths of people who support, the Palestinian side. No. This is the representation of Israel. He clearly knows that the plan prepared for a draft, even in its form as a 60-day ceasefire that is potentially going to increase to an all-out deal, is a surrender. Why? Because the resistance is still going to be there, and Israel is going to give concessions. Israel is going to give in. And they're already having certain moves that indicate that Israel is indeed giving in, despite all of the catastrophe and destruction. Netanyahu wanted to avoid that, so he doesn't have to face any sort of challenges in the cabinet meeting and face any problems that would lead to the collapse of the government, because he doesn't want to do that now. In the meantime, the Israeli army is withdrawing from Gaza, not just withdrawing small numbers or from general locations like where there is no active combat. No. They're withdrawing from the areas with the fiercest combat, where Khan Yunis, the same place that we've been publishing footage that the Palestinian resistance is publishing and has been publishing for a very long time, they're withdrawing. And their excuse is that we finished the job. What job? What finish what job? You are getting a huge beating from Palestinian resistance fighters, and you're withdrawing, and you're calling that an accomplishment. But still, the reports in Israel, they withdrew because they completed the mission in Khan Yunis, and they're moving to Judea and Samaria. And they're not mentioning withdrawal, mind you, or, realignment, engagement, whatever you want to call it. They completed their mission in Khan Yunis, and they are moving to Judea and Samaria, so that the Israeli public will not think really that we're withdrawing from Gaza. No, we are still in Gaza, but we completed the operation, and therefore we're going to the West Bank. Military buildings, weapons, and explosive, and whatever they're saying, all of that targeted in Khan Yunis. Total, absolute lie. And evidence from the ground proves that these people have been getting a beating. They have been roasting in their troop carriers by Palestinian resistance fighters with sandals, men facing machines, genocidal machines, and they are forcing them to withdraw. Remember that. Please contextualize that. The men of Gaza with sandals are forcing the genocide army to withdraw. Why? Because of their resistance to them. Not because they said, oh yeah, please help us. And no, because of the resistance. That's why. The language that Israel understands. All the time Benjamin Netanyahu talks about, peace through power and ceasefire through power. That's what's happening from Gaza to him. Withdrawal through power. The Palestinian resistance power is expelling the child killers, in short. But this report is misleading. Why is it misleading? Not only because it's not stating that they're withdrawing because of the beating that they're getting from the Palestinian resistance. It's because it's not giving you the... And what is the whole picture exactly? That Israel decided to move 2 brigades from the Gaza Strip from the 98th Division. Not just the paratroopers, another brigade from the 98th Division. What, did they complete their mission in Rafah, for the same area that we saw the resistance fighters giving them blows, or in Jabalia with more resistance images today, or in Beit Hanun on the Israeli borders? The Palestinian resistance is everywhere. You didn't finish any operation, if you want to talk about resistance, but you didn't finish anything. So you have a move here coming from the Israeli army of a withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. These are actions on the ground, and these things are being reported and confirmed by the Israeli army, because they're saying we completed our mission. And what's the story? Well, before anything, the Israeli army is trying to cover up this whole story of completing the mission, so that people are not too alarmed in Israel. Because a lot of the moves that are happening, by the way, is for internal consumption, so that the brainwashed can be even more brainwashed inside of Israel. They're saying, oh, we can return if there is no deal to a much greater operation, and there's going to be, gates of hell is not going to be anything much worse than the gates of hell, and the decision has been made. And we've been hearing this garbage now for over a year. We're going to go in, and the general's plan, and this and that, and all of them, by the way, genocidal, abhorrent plans that the lowest scum of humanity wouldn't do, but these people do. The worst of humanity against the population, starvation, every single thing, by the way, based on an ideology and belief from the Israeli army and from the politicians in Israel, and those who support them and pretend like they don't know. And they talk to you about, oh, extremists here and there. No, all of them know. But now they're to cover up the withdrawal and huge failure in the face of the Palestinian resistance fighters who are walking in sandals in Gaza and creating their own weapons because they have been betrayed and neglected by their surrounding Arab regimes, sitting there viewing a population being annihilated and doing nothing whatsoever. They still forced this genocide army that's getting constant support from the United States administration, forcing them to leave. But they're gonna have to show that we have a plan B, and that plan B is worse than the gates of hell. Trump was saying the gates of hell and releases them now in gates of hell. And then Netanyahu's government, hell. Okay. And, okay, you did commit a genocide and are committing a genocide. We understand that you are barbaric beings attacking innocent people for nothing. But what did the resistance do? They continued to fight you up until the last second, to the level where they're expelling you from Gaza. This report concluded that and actually spoke about the criticism internally, primarily from the IDF Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir, who has his son fighting in Gaza, and who has been constantly talking about the fact that the IDF is advising the political level to reach a ceasefire in Gaza. We need a ceasefire now. But he has to follow orders. But according to Netanyahu, they haven't been following all of his orders, because he was reassuring the finance minister that, no, believe me, they'll listen to me this time if we go on another campaign. Anyway, he's saying that this plan of Rafah and the humanitarian city that Benjamin Netanyahu had, and now clearly completely thrown in the bin, has more holes than Swiss cheese, in his words. So he's criticizing the current plan, and he's not really convinced about any future plan, but he has to come up with this statement after the withdrawal of 2 brigades from the 98th Division, or whatever's left from the 98th Division. By the way, time will reveal how much the Palestinian resistance hurt and annihilated this genocidal army. Time will reveal. You wait and see. What we saw this in the past 2 years is a fraction of what really happened in Gaza. And this genocide and barbarism against the population is to cover up this huge failure and huge beating that the Israeli terror army got from Palestinian resistance. He's saying that to cover up, although he wants to end it. And he's saying that we have a really good potential to reach a deal within a week now with the Palestinians and have a ceasefire in Gaza. So Netanyahu skipping the cabinet meeting. Smotrich, one of the most prominent figures in his government, is saying woe and woe to anyone who will collapse the national government and support a surrender agreement to Gaza. The genocide army withdrew 2 brigades from Gaza. One of them was the paratrooper brigade in Khan Yunis, the most intense area of battle in Gaza, as confirmed by Israel, by the way, and in an area that has seen some of the biggest ambushes against the child-killing murderers of the IDF in recent weeks and months, and ever since the beginning. And there are talks. Now, the Israeli Broadcasting Authority today said that in Israel, they are estimating that there will be a breakthrough to a deal within days, according to not only the Israeli Broadcasting Authority, but Israeli media too. This is the statement that came from the Israeli Broadcasting Authority. According to estimates in Jerusalem, Hamas will respond positively to the new proposal for the deployment of the IDF forces in the Gaza Strip. The new maps that Israel presented to Hamas include significant flexibility. So the Broadcasting Authority confirms that Israel included significant flexibility inside of Gaza in terms of its withdrawal, and that Benjamin Netanyahu provided concessions and flexibility in redrawing what they call the Morag axis, an area to the north of Rafah, with the deployment of the IDF forces in what is understood to be to the same areas that Israel withdrew to, approximately, more or less, in January 2025, when the last happened. They knew they're going to have these concessions, but Benjamin Netanyahu was delaying time for the breaking of the Israeli Knesset so that he has a smooth ceasefire without too many problems, because there's a lot of tension and he doesn't want to collapse the government. Now, he's for a ceasefire. So Israel is confirming that there are concessions, what they're calling flexibility. That was reported in other places too, in Israel, and also based on American sources too. This reports agreement this week. Relaxation in the Philadelphia Axis. This is all terminology, by the way, to concession or surrender, in at least in negotiations, certain things. Shut up. We're going to have to shut up and accept the fact that the Palestinians will not accept that. The deal will include the release of 28 prisoners of war, 10 alive, 18 dead during the 60 days. And of course, they will be split in day 1, day 10, 30. Several will be released at a time. Then Americans are confirming that too, especially Adam Bowler. Adam Bowler now that I was more optimistic than I was, as I'm more optimistic now, and that we've given the Palestinians big opportunities. Again, he has a tone, by the way, that will try and blame the Palestinian resistance if they won't be accepting a deal. And that's something that we already saw many times, by the way. Biden telling them, you have a deal, you need to take the deal now, you must have the deal. And Trump as well, you have the deal, and, you know, blaming it on the Palestinian side, despite the fact that Netanyahu himself accepted and retracted and broke multiple ceasefires. You know, they ignore all of that and shamelessly try and blame the Palestinian resistance lack of acceptance of dishonorable ceasefire agreement to the murder of the Palestinian people. He's saying, oh, since last week, hundreds were killed on a daily basis. Who killed them? Israelis and Americans killed them. The American mercenaries in the Gaza, what's called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and the Israeli genocide soldiers. Those are the ones who killed the Palestinian people, not the Palestinian resistance. But they always want to flip it the other way to suit their narrative. So based on all, there are some significant movements to a level where Benjamin Netanyahu could have potentially faked his own poisoning to avoid a cabinet meeting that might collapse his government because of the level of concessions that he's giving in the ceasefire negotiations to the Palestinian side, by the way. And there's not going to be any return from that because they're incapable. They are incapable to defeat the Palestinian resistance. Why? Because the Palestinian resistance is undefeatable. Simple. Plain and simple. They will never be defeated. These people are full of faith. They have justice on their side. They have humanity on their side. And they have every freedom-seeking individual on earth on their side. They're not going to be defeated. And Israel knows that very well. And in the meantime, they're confirming, by the way, that they lost. To who? To Ansar. The Eilat port had declared bankruptcy just after the attack started. Then, in recent weeks, the whole company decided to shut. So it was not operating before, but now they decided to shut. They were unable to pay debts, despite the fact that the government supported them with tens of millions. But now is how they lost to Yemen in what they said the victory of the Houthis in Yemen over Israel. Hundreds lost their livelihoods. And in this article here, in one of the Israeli newspapers, they're saying the economic consequences of the port closure are only beginning to make waves in Eilat and its surroundings, but the heavy-duty transportation industry in the south is already reporting significant damage. And in this report, they were not only talking about the significant impact of this campaign of Ansarullah in Yemen, who bravely stood up against Israel and the genocide coalition because of their committing a genocide inside of the Gaza Strip, because they were committing a genocide and still are, and having this embargo on Israel in line with international law. They also affected the economy internally that was relying on this port in Israel internally. Why? Because so many businesses rely on ports, transportation businesses, services businesses, anything that relates to all of these logistics involved in the running of a port get hit really badly, let alone the businesses that want to transfer certain things and they don't get anything, which leads to a huge shortage. And this is another proof that the impact of Yemen against Israel in its campaign has been extremely significant. People were saying, oh, no, don't. And, you know, the other puppet regimes speaking about, oh, the impact and we can't and this and that. A group of people who, by the way, were in war for so long and had their country destroyed and faced starvation, the Yemenis, backed by the same people, the same regimes, backed by the same superpowers conducting these offenses against them, they went to support people across the sea who are facing a genocide. When regimes around the Palestinians are the excuse, you know, and we don't want war and we don't have the capacity, and Israel is confirming how effective that was. But this release of this report now, by the way, is also in line with many other reports that would show the disadvantages of continuing the genocide. We've already been speaking about the fact that Israel has been releasing images and footage of the Palestinian resistance and even of the suffering of the Palestinians in Gaza in recent weeks, which was unheard of before. If you go just 2 or 3 months back, it's as if nothing was happening. It's as if none of their soldiers were getting killed in Gaza, and it's as if the population wasn't facing any starvation or any problem whatsoever. Now, on a regular basis, they provide videos that even the Palestinian resistance would come up and verify, like the video that I posted yesterday of that footage being published by Israel. Why are they doing that? All of that is to justify reaching a ceasefire in the minds of the Israeli public, whilst not affecting the ruling establishment that much. Because we're talking about a manipulated and brainwashed population. They want to continue they've been feeding them that we need to continue throughout all of this time. But all of a sudden, the prime minister the wanted war criminal prime minister, decides to do a U-turn and have a ceasefire and give concessions. How are we going to explain that exactly? Well, we're going to have to start showing some of the impact that's happening either in the front in Gaza or in Israel as a whole through the attacks of Yemen that are proving to be lethal to the economy in Israel. And these were the main things that I wanted to share with you in this live stream. As usual, I hope I added some beneficial information for you. Thank you so much for everyone for tuning in for another show, everyone who supported with supers and participated in the chat. In the meantime, stay blessed, take care, and I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone. Salam.